Today, I'm super excited to have Chris Higgins join us.
Hey man, how's it going?
Check it out. Notice anything about my wardrobe today?
Oh yeah, man, representing.
So directly from Knoxville, Tennessee, Chris Higgins has been a professional photographer for years now. He works professionally for a number of brands, and I'll let you tell us a little bit more, Chris. Why don't we start with your backdrop, kind of how you ended up where you are today, and kind of where you began and where the two worlds intersected of caving and photography.
Yeah, so caving really drove me into photography. I'd always had an interest in photography and taking pictures and stuff, but going caving, we were seeing all these cool things, but you try to explain it to somebody and you're like, okay, it's this dark, damp place, it's full of mud, but like it's actually pretty awesome. And we started taking pictures with cheap disposable cameras because we didn't want to take expensive cameras caving, but the pictures didn't do it justice. So we started taking DSLRs and then using flashlights and then trying to get some strobes and then into flash bulbs, and it kind of evolved into more of a career than just a passion even.
How did you get into caving in the beginning? Was it an accident, something that you studied? I know that there are a lot of caves in the state of Tennessee. I was actually doing a little bit of research for our talk, and I was fascinated by how the caves started. Maybe you can give us a little bit of background on that as well.
Yeah, so my dad was a caver when he was growing up, and when I turned 16, he bought me a book that showed where some of the caves in Tennessee are, and it turns out Tennessee has the highest concentration of caves anywhere in the world. We have over 10,000 caves in Tennessee, and just one thing led to another. I went into a cave for the first time, having no idea what was in there, what to expect, and I was like, wow, this is a whole other world that I just had no idea even existed. It was right under our feet, just a couple miles from my house, and it evolved into a passion for exploring the underground, because there's nowhere else on earth that you can really go with just a pair of shoes and a flashlight, essentially, that no one else has ever been. But
Right.
Caves, are that place.
How did your father start?
The Boy Scouts.
Wow.
When he was growing up, showed him caving, and then they went on several caving trips when he was growing up. And then he knew I was into hiking and backpacking, when I was growing up. And once I got a car, he was like, hey, you should go caving. I'm not going to go with you, but you should go.
Very nice. So so you started at an early age with your enthusiasm for caving. How did photography evolve?
That's what drove me into photography, was caving, wanting to share what caving was with people, because there's just no way that words can describe what you're seeing when you're underground,
Uh-huh.
And also when you're there, you don't really see what's in the photos because it's totally dark and all you see is what your headlamp shows. So when we light these photos up, we're able to see the caves, I hate to use the term in full light, but in full light.
Yeah. And has your work, these or geological groups, or do you share some of the work beyond just the professional photography aspect of it?
Yeah, absolutely. Caving's all science driven, outside of the actual exploration with it. And I think that, the saying is exploration without science is just adventure. So we do a lot of, water sampling and specimen collecting, because there's all kinds of new species of crawdads and crickets and scorpions and spiders that we find that are cave adapted. So the photography has definitely led into that, documenting that and participating in the collection and the science of it. One of my best friends and caving partners, he's in the photo right there that you're showing. He's a geologist, so he studies geology specifically here in Tennessee.
Okay. And does that lead into, is it kind of a revolving circle where maybe by doing work for some of these institutions, it allows you to explore new caves and new opportunities?
Absolutely. Without the science, it's just pretty pictures. So we get a lot of people who, to get funding for trips and for expeditions, we have to do the science research and document where we're going and map the caves and collect the data So it's not just, hey, here we are doing something cool and it's really, really pretty, but there's actually, some deeper meaning behind it.
But let's talk about the gear. So obviously your work and your career has evolved, and I'm assuming that your photography has evolved as well. Walk us through that evolution, kind of how you started, what additional components of cameras, lenses, lighting, as you alluded to, is a critical component of that kind of photography. Walk us through what that was like, what equipment you may have used, why you evolved, and how it worked.
Yeah. So, I mean, we literally started with disposable cameras when I was like 16, and just using the on-camera flash and the disposable camera, shooting film, take it to Walgreens, get it developed, and quickly realize that wasn't going to cut it. It was like, here's this blurry photo of, what this awesome thing I'm trying to describe. So we switched right about the time we switched to digital. We shot a couple of years on film, but it was really frustrating because you have no idea what you're shooting. It's pitch black dark, and you go get the film developed, and all of a sudden you have, white slides and black slides. You're like, well, this is worthless. But and you have one keeper, out of 3 rolls of film. But then we quickly switched to digital, and then everything kind of changed because we were able to use strobes and, shoot the same setup. You don't know how much light's going to reflect off the walls. Some of the walls are black, some are white. And it takes, it's a lot of trial and error. And it's just evolved into, digital cameras, and protecting the digital cameras is one of the hardest parts of caving because moisture and dirt and sand, everything that's bad for a camera is in a cave. I like to take like an A6500, something small and mirrorless. But if it's going to be something where we're shooting it for a job for sure, I'm hoping it's going to be a portfolio shot. D750, something full frame is the go-to.
Okay. How about the lenses?
So on the full frame, it's the Nikon 14-24. And then on the Sony, I have a couple different lenses. I've got one of the, I think it's Rokinon, that brand, 12mm manual focus lens. It's great. It's inexpensive and it's light and it's small. But I've also got the Sony 16mm 1.4, I think.
Nice. And do you carry a lot of that with you and then you switch?
Oh, yeah.
Or do you decide in advance before you go on a trip which one you're going to take, which lenses you're going to take?
On every expedition, I take multiple cameras, but I leave them on the surface just in case I, fry is underground because of the moisture and dirt and all those things we were talking about. I like to leave lenses, and you usually shoot ultra wide. Ultra wide's kind of the go-to for underground too, because you're trying to showcase as much as you can.
Makes sense. Okay. How about the lighting? Tell us a little bit about how you light some of these shots and the differences between the bigger caves, the smaller caves, the enclosures.
Yeah. So small caves are pretty easy as far as the lighting goes. We'll use little speed lights or even headlamps sometimes. It's a long exposure, 3 or 5 seconds, and kind of light paint it in. But for the big stuff, that's where it gets hard. Is we use these one-time use magnesium flash bulbs that when you fire them, they're burned, they're done. You get one try, and we'll, some shots we'll use 5 or 6 of them at once, and they're the size of a regular household light bulb. So when they go off, they're really bright, but they only burn for a 30th of a second. So trying to time all that and coordinate that with people in a room where everything echoes really bad, it can be a kind of a struggle.
Okay. And tell us a little bit about getting there, because it seems like even getting to as involved as the photography itself.
Oh, absolutely. So here in Tennessee, we're lucky. Our caves are in our backyard. Most of the time, it's just a couple miles of hiking to get to them. And the irony is, you hike up the mountain to go down inside the mountain, to climb out of the mountain, to hike back off the mountain. It's never easy. It's just kind of up and down, up and down. But in Mexico and in Peru, some of them are the most remote places I would consider on planet Earth. The ones in Peru we were going to go to this year, unfortunately, we had to cancel our expedition, but we're going to go next year, hopefully. They're out in the middle. It's the very end of the road, headed into the Amazon jungle at 15,000 feet. And then it's a 6-hour horseback ride from where the road ends up into the mountains where the caves are. So it's one of Nat Geo's dark zones, where there's no light pollution at all, out in the middle of nowhere.
Now, I've noticed that in a lot of these trips, you've discovered remains. What is that all about?
Yeah, so in Tennessee, we have a lot of Native American population here, throughout history. And caves throughout time have always kind of had a religious or significance purpose to pass cults of remains or, buried remains in these caves. And the video you're showing right now, those are at the bottom of a 120-foot drop from the surface, a free drop.
Wow.
So we don't know, why those bodies are there, but there's at least 12 of them, I think, is what we counted. And they had them dated, I think it was 2,000 years old or 1,200 years old. I can't remember off the top of my head, but they were very old, and no real reason why they were there. Whether it was religious or body disposal, who knows?
Man, Indiana Jones got nothing on you guys.
Yeah, I'd like to think that, but I know that's not true.
Yeah. So then today, what kinds of expeditions, and I mean like nowadays, what kinds of expeditions have you been doing? What are some of the trips that you're maybe looking forward to, assuming that travel resumes? What are some of the things that are on your calendar?
We were supposed to go in April to Mexico for a month to do a caving expedition down there. It's an annual expedition we've done every year for the past 6 years. And it's an awesome trip. It's the deepest cave in the Western Hemisphere, and we're currently mapping and exploring it. So every trip we add more depth and more length to the cave and discovered more species of animals. We discovered a new tarantula, several new spiders, a new cave scorpion that's completely clear and cave adapted, all brand new to science. And every year we find something new like that. So I was really looking forward to that. And obviously we're just postponing until 2021. Okay. And then in August, we were going to go to Peru, where I was just talking about. We went there in 2014, I believe, and we're going to go back this year, but now we're pushing it to 2021 again.
We have a lot of canyoneering enthusiasts in our community as well. In fact,
yeah.
next week we'll be talking about canyoneering, and obviously there are a lot of similarities between what they do and what you do.
Yeah,
they're
absolutely.
often doing it above ground, and you guys are doing it both. You're going. Talking about highs and lows, you guys, are climbing a mountain and then sometimes going half a mile or more underground and
yeah,
doing
absolutely.
the same things in the dark in places that nobody has been before, which is crazy. What advice would you have? Like, if people are interested in doing some of this, how do they do it? How do they learn more about it? How do they find out where some of this stuff is?
The NSS, the National Speleological Society, it's the national organization that all the cavers join when you get into caving, and then they have local what they call grottos, but they're basically a caving club. It's just their word for it, and they have them all over the country. Just about every major city has one, and lots of smaller cities have them too. And that's the best way. That's what I tell everybody. If you want to get into caving, you don't know where to start, you just look up the NSS. You can find their grottos on their website. I think it's caves.org, and you can find your local cavers that way. And everybody's always, welcoming and helpful. Everybody wants to get people into the sport, because the more people that get into the sport, the more, caves are found, the more they're explored. Everybody's looking for the next sucker to, stick down a tiny hole.
Are there accreditations or licensing rights that you have to get when you go? Do you go with tours? Do these organizations have such a thing as tours, or?
There's been talk of it for years in the U.S. Europe has some stuff set up where you can get an accreditation. So, like, if you want to go on a trip, I know so-and-so, I want to go here, will you take me, kind of thing. And it takes a little while to, gain a reputation or a rapport to be able to get to go on trips, they're far and remote.
Yeah, I think some of your work has been featured on TV, right? You've been
yeah.
on Discovery Channel, Travel Channel, is that right?
Yeah, just about every network, the Discovery networks, Animal Planet, Travel Channel, Discovery, they all want to feature caves and they never know where to start. So I get lots of emails about show pitches of like, hey, we want to do this episode in a cave. What's it going to take? I never kind of BS them. I tell them, like, hey, it's hard. It's an environment that's rough to film in. I'd love to help, and every once in a while, a show comes through and they're like, all right, we're going to do it. We're going to go caving. Yeah, absolutely.
What advice then, Chris, do you have in terms of what people should bring? Depending on where they are, what should they wear? What cameras to bring? What lighting to bring?
Yeah.
What clothes, apparel, that kind of thing. What advice do you have? for them?
So caves, the temperature in the cave, it's all based on where you are in the world. It's the average above ground temperature annually. So in Tennessee, the temperature is like 58 degrees. So it's, it's pretty cold if you're sitting still. Obviously, if you're moving, it's nice and hot, but you want to dress warm, no cotton. And then first and foremost, you want a helmet. That's the key piece of equipment outside of your lights. You need to go caving is a good pair of boots, some warm clothes, helmet, and 3 light sources. Outside of that, you kind of evolve what you need to go caving as you learn and as you get into caving, because everybody carries a little something different, and you usually carry what you need the trip after you need it. You know what I mean? You realize you need zip ties to put your shoe back together. So the next trip you bring zip ties and you end up never needing them. But yeah. And then as far as cameras and stuff, yeah, my buddy Ryan just posted peanut M&Ms. That's the go-to food. But as far as camera gear, I carry everything in Pelican cases. And then when we're doing stuff around the water, always in an Outex case inside the Pelican case. So you got the double layer of protection.
Okay. One of the questions came in about using the Altx Dome, which is, I think, something that you do as well. Obviously, the dome makes a bigger difference if you're doing water and split level photography. So you don't necessarily need the dome, but you absolutely can use it.
I love the dome. I think I called you a couple of years ago. I was going to Hawaii, and I was like, man, I want to shoot some split level stuff while I'm in Hawaii. And you had a prototype for the lens I was using at the time and sent me the prototype, and that thing is awesome, absolutely awesome. I did some split level stuff in a cave. It's been a couple months ago, but that was super fun.
Yeah, as with many of our users and ambassadors, Chris is multi-talented, and he doesn't just shoot caving photography, of course. He's all over the world. He shoots adventure photography. What are some of your favorite times of?
Well, but caving's obviously my main focus and passion, but anything that's unusual and, you haven't really seen much of. I don't like to do the run of the mill, Instagram, travel photos. Obviously I take those when I go traveling, but my favorite thing is to shoot things that other people haven't shot or in conditions that other people haven't shot it. Like that waterfall you're showing right now, that's not normally there. That's normally a small trickle. So we waited till there was a big flood to go there and shoot it with that waterfall. And if you zoom in on it, you can see a tiny person hanging right in the middle of the frame. He's hanging in the waterfall.
Yeah.
And probably 24 people had taken that same photo beforehand, but with no water. And I was like, there's got to be a big waterfall here in the spring. There has to be. So we went after it rained, and we're blown away by how much water there was.
It really is amazing. The other thing I've noticed that is unique, in tune with your unique photography, is that you do some rescue and some, safety work.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So my background before photography was becoming my full-time job. I was EMT for years. And I got connected with these guys in South Carolina on the Task Force 1 there with the National Guard to do helicopter rescue and for the rescue team, because I always wanted to work around helicopters because it's super cool, obviously. And then working out of the water with helicopters is even cooler, I think. So it was really cool jumping in and out of the Blackhawks with the camera attached to me and then taking pictures of the rescuers, training and working.
Yeah, we deal with the armed forces on a number of fronts.
Oh yeah,
Coast Guard.
Sure.
Yeah, we've had a lot of users that are using it in really cool uses that we didn't even know about. And from time to time, I even learn of needs that they have in terms of the equipment, the wind, the dust, the mud, and things that the propeller's kicking down. And so it's intriguing to us to find out, and good to see people like you using the gear in environments like that as well.
Oh yeah, a bunch of the National Guard, big blue bag strapped to me, and they're like, "What is that thing?" And then I jump in the water and be like, "That's my camera." They're like, "Wow, that's incredible. Where do I get one of those? How do I get one of those?"
Yeah, no, please keep sending them our way.
Absolutely.
That is amazing. What's the craziest story that you can relate? And oh man, share some stories with us.
Yeah. So I don't really like spiders. You know, I'm not like afraid of spiders, but I'm not going to go up and grab a spider, you know, and be like, hey, what's this spider do? We were in Mexico and we were on a survey trip, so we were mapping the cave, and we always carry collection jars with us just in case we see something unusual. But we were late getting out of the cave, so we sent one guy to the surface. So we had to climb a couple hundred feet up to go let our ride know that, hey, we're going to be about an hour late coming out of the cave because we're moving slower than we wanted to. And he ran out without his bag, and then came back to get his bag. And he comes back and he goes, guys, you're not going to like this. And I was like, what? And the entrance to this cave was a really tiny slot for like 10 feet. And you had to lay on your side and shimmy through this thing to get into where the cave opened up. And he goes, the slot coming into the cave is full of tarantulas. And we were like, tarantulas? What do you mean tarantulas? He's like, big spiders, like, you know, the size of your hand. And I was like, dude, there are no tarantulas in Mexico, like in the caves. And we get up to the entrance, and you can see some headlamps on the surface where guys are chasing around these tarantulas that he'd scared out of the cave in a field. And sure enough, we went to crawl out of the cave. In every little crevice and every little pocket, there were these tarantulas the size of your hand, just like crammed up in there. And they ended up being a new species to science, a new tarantula species.
Wow.
But we had no idea they were there, and crawling out of the cave, I guess, at night.
That's amazing. So again, in true Indiana Jones fashion, he didn't like snakes. You don't like
Oh, yeah. Oh, we use that
spiders,
quote a lot.
and you had to run into the spiders. I suspect
Spiders,
there are a lot
why
of
did it always
bats.
have to be spiders?
A lot of bats in these caves as well, huh?
Yeah. You know, 10 years ago, before there was a fungus called white nose syndrome, we saw a lot of bats. Like, you know, you'd see hundreds of bats. And now that disease came through and wiped out almost 90% of the bats in Tennessee and the Northeast. So bats have been becoming more and more scarce, but they're starting to rebound now. But yeah, I think it was 2009, white nose showed up, and it just kind of appeared out of nowhere, kind of like coronavirus did, except for the bats. And it killed a massive population of the bats.
Wow. But that can't be good.
No. I mean, you know, they eat their weight in mosquitoes every night, so they're a very valuable mammal.
Wow. That's amazing. Okay. What other stories can you tell us, maybe in, you know, different countries, about getting to the caves, or, you know, getting back? Did you guys ever get lost? Do you have trouble sometimes just with the navigation?
I mean, definitely. Trying to think of a good story about being lost. Well, I can tell you one locally where we got lost. We went down in a sinkhole that's a huge sinkhole in the middle of Tennessee. There's nothing built inside the sinkhole, but people live on the rim, and it's about 800 feet deep. And when I say sinkhole, I use the term sinkhole loosely because it's like 1.5 miles in diameter. You know, it's a huge crater. Like if you look at it on a topo map, it looks like a meteor may have hit the earth there.
Wow.
And we hiked down in it. We explored the cave all day. It was my first time hiking to this cave. There's no trails or anything. And the guy who knew the way back to the car went to the car early. And we're like, oh, we'll hike back to the car. We know where it is. And me and my other buddy came out in the middle of the night. It was pitch black dark. You couldn't see the stars. And I was like, hey, man, which way's the car? And he's like, oh, I thought you knew how to get back to the car. So we just picked a direction and started hiking. Hiked all the way up, climbed to the top of the edge of the sinkhole to get phone service, and realized we were on the exact opposite side, 10 miles from the car, in the middle of the night at like 2 a.m. So we had to hike 10 miles around the edge of the sinkhole back to the car. So yeah, getting lost is definitely part of the fun.
A few years ago, I invited Chris to come to a photo event up in New York City, and Chris really stole the show there. Everybody was just super fascinated, not only by his work, because as you've seen, some of his photos are just amazing, but you know, just getting the photos. And I think that there are a lot of people like Gabe DeWitt, who does kayaking photography up in West Virginia. And he interacted with Jimmy Chin, you know, years ago, and was picked up by Jimmy for a prize in some of his photography.
Oh, wow.
And, you know, Jimmy's exploring places that nobody had ever been to before, and therefore documenting it, and the work stands out. And I think you fall under that category as well.
You're honored you even say that. But, yeah, I think
it's true.
I think the biggest difference with like mountains and caves, as far as relatability goes, is you can stand at the bottom of a mountain and go, wow, it'd be really hard to go to the top of that mountain because you can see exactly where the top of the mountain is. But you stand on the surface and you look at a 1 foot diameter hole and you have no idea that, you know, there's something as hard, if not harder than that mountain below you, you know, underground. And you don't know how deep it is until you go. Versus a mountain, you know exactly how tall it is before you climb it. And it's hard to sell that, like, that thought to somebody. Because you see a picture of a cave and you have no idea that it's, you know, 3,000 feet deep directly below your feet.
Right. With a lot of these caves, that you're exploring for the first time, do you take gear to spend the night in? Do you spend time? Do you budget the time that you're going to spend? What is that like when you go? Do you have any kind of survey of how deep it is? Something? How does that work?
Yeah, we definitely plan, like, you know, we always, the joke is if you bring a rope, you won't need it, you know, if you don't know where you're going, like if you're exploring a new cave. So we usually take the bare minimum the first couple trips until we discover what we need, you know, and then we'll make multiple trips. Obviously, in Mexico, being one of the places I love to go caving, because the caves are so deep and elaborate down there. When we go caving in Mexico, we know what we're getting into, and we know that we're going to be setting up camp and camping underground and spending, you know, sometimes up to a week or more underground. So we carry, you know, that kind of stuff with us. And sometimes it takes multiple trips. You know, you carry your camp stuff in and leave, come back out, get the camera and bring it in, and have to take multiple trips to get everything in because your bag's so big and heavy. Because most of the time you're not just wearing a backpack. You know, people think, oh, you just put it in a backpack and carry it. But as you can see on this video you're playing right now, a lot of the times you're crawling and sliding 2 trips.
Okay. And how big is the team? I'm assuming that different jobs call for different tools, and so you plan accordingly. You know, how big is your team, or do you do caving with a set group?
You know, I like taking anybody who wants to go. You know, anybody who wants to go caving, I love introducing people to the sport. And, you know, I'll take a small camera setup when it's someone's first time. But if we're going to photo, you know, and document something that's big and hard and deep, yeah, I've got 3 or 4 people that are kind of, you know, my go-to friends that we go caving with. But when we go to Mexico, we'll have an expedition of 30 or 40 people, and we cave in groups of 3 or 5, give or take.
Okay. All right. Wow. I mean, look, there's so much to discover, and it's super exciting. What haven't I asked that you wanted to talk about, or things that people should know, or images that you wanted to share that I can pull up and show people?
I mean, I think the biggest thing about caving is conservation. You know, that's a huge topic, because the surface of the earth, you know, you can go pick a rock up and take it and the earth will heal. You know, the moss will grow back and the grass will come back. But caves, you know, if you move a rock, that rock's going to be where you moved it until someone else moves it, you know, for eternity. And they don't heal. So, you know, not to take anything out of the cave. You know, all the formations and the pretty rocks are there, but they're there for everybody to see. So when you take it out, you know, people don't get to see it. And I think that's a topic a lot of people avoid when they're talking about caving, is conservation, because it is so important, though.
Interesting. Are there, within the United States, Tennessee has a lot of caves for a lot of geological reasons. Do you know of other countries that you would consider meccas? I don't know if the U.S. qualifies as a caving mecca.
Yeah.
Other places that are considered that?
Absolutely. I mean, the U.S. is definitely a caving mecca. You know, people come from all over the world to cave, especially in Tennessee. We call it TAG, Tennessee, Alabama, Georgia. It's kind of the 3 states, and the limestone runs right between all 3 states. And it's a very big caving mecca. But Mexico is a huge caving mecca. You know, some of the deepest caves in the world. Sylvania over in Europe, they have they're quickly becoming the next Tennessee as far as cave density. All across Europe, Switzerland has a lot of deep caves that are deep and cold, and same with the UK. The UK has a lot of deep caves. They're kind of spread out. You know, they just got a handful of each around Greece. The island of Crete has a lot of caves. I want to say it's like 3,000 caves on the island.
Okay. Is
And then
there
South
a,
America is just opening up. We're just finding more and more stuff down there as we look.
where in South America?
Peru specifically, and then a lot of people are finding a lot of stuff in Brazil.
Okay. Is there a correlation? Because I've been trying to find a correlation between the places you're describing, and I was at first thinking some of these are not as tall, but you've got huge caves. Are there correlations?
It all has to do with limestone. I mean, not to say that caves don't form in other forms of rock, but limestone is the main cave forming rock. So wherever an ancient seabed was, wherever, back when the oceans were several hundred feet higher and land was lower, sediment fell and shells developed and sand fell down and it formed limestone. And limestone's a very porous rock that's easily dissolved by the acid rain and everything else that helps dissolve the limestone. And the areas that have, limestone at elevation with lots of rainfall get the biggest caves.
It's almost like a different world, a different dimension, and to see you guys kayaking and diving in some of these environments, and just to think of all the gear. And
I know. I think during the Photo Plus event in New York, I told somebody, one of the pictures I showed, they were like, "Well, how long did it take that photo?" And I was like, "The setup or the actual trip into the cave?" And they were like, "Well, both." And I said the setup took a couple hours to get everybody positioned and get the lighting right, but it took us 7 days to take that one picture because we were in the cave for a week just to take. We went down to take that one specific photo, and it took 7 days underground to get that one photo. Yeah.
So Chris, I leave it up to you with either final thoughts or things that you thought of that you wanted to bring up. Anything else that we didn't cover?
I don't think so. I mean, I think it's something that no matter your fear of the dark or tight spaces, you should try caving. Whether it's in a national park or a state park or even on your own, it's a really exciting, interesting, and very different type of activity. It's also great in bad weather. If it's raining or cold outside, caves are always the same temperature.
So thank you so much for joining us. Always fun catching up with you.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.